Hi there everyone, it's Misty here. Welcome to my 2020 Word of the Year reveal video. I don't know what else to call it. So if you're new here or new to me, hi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Misty and I don't make New Year's resolutions. I haven't made New Year's resolutions in probably 6 or 7 years. What I've been doing rather than New Year's resolution is picking a word of the year. And the word of the year for me is kind of the overarching theme of that year. So one year I picked organization and I put us on a budget. I organized my craft room. I organized my office at work. One year it was consistency and I was making sure that I was posting and blogging, posting to YouTube and social media and blogging 3 days a week. One year was onward, and I think that was in 2018 because 2017 was such a shit year with my health and, developing my myasthenia gravis and going through a ton of testing and all those other things. So, and then last year my word was joy. And unfortunately, I feel like I didn't have much joy in my life last year. Because it was just, I was in the hospital I stayed in the hospital 3 times because of my back. I had a 4th, hospital visit. It was just a really rough year from like June until December. So, and it's still kind of rough. So I had, I didn't really focus on my word for 2019, but I've picked a word for 2020 that I think is going to work out really well for me. And that word is tend, T-E-N-D. And I'm using the verb, and it's care or look after, give one's attention to. So there are areas in my life that I want to tend. Like, think of it as you're tending a garden. So instead of tending a garden, I'm tending the garden of Misty. So I want, focus on, my body, my mind, my emotional health, my relationships, etc. And so what I thought I would do is I would walk you through kind of what I've mapped out. I haven't mapped out everything, so I'm not going to be able to touch on everything, but I'll touch on what I can. I'm also going to film a separate video for my Jolly Fat Elf channel, which is kind of my business. I do card making videos. I'm a Stampin' Up demonstrator. I do planning videos. I sell planner stickers. So all of that's kind of my business side of things. And so it's going to look a little bit differently. There's going to be a little bit of overlap like with my Patreon, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So yeah, let's get in this. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is my body. So I mentioned in my weigh-in video that went up last week that there's only really the only thing I can control in what happens to my body, etc., is what I put in it and like how I treat it. So that's it. I have to give up. I can't control anything else. I can only control what I control. So I want to tend to my body this year by being consistent with keto and carnivore so I can get off insulin. I want to get to a point where I am controlling my diabetes through diet alone. In order to do that, I have to get back off insulin, but also making sure that I'm sticking to, lower carb or no carb, such as carnivore, to keep my numbers down in a reasonable range. And the side effect of getting off of insulin will be an ability to lose weight a little bit easier. The other medicine that I'm on that causes weight gain, which is Lyrica, I don't know what's going to happen with that. I mentioned in my weigh-in video for this week that I'm going to talk to my neurologist at the end of the month because Lyrica really isn't cutting it anymore. And there's not a whole lot of medications approved for nerve pain, but I'm going to see if there's something different that I can take or something on top of. Maybe I can lower my Lyrica dose and add something else on top of it and that will also help lose the weight. So, but my main goal for 2020 isn't to focus on the weight loss. It's to be consistent with keto and to get off insulin. Now, there's so many naysayers about keto and there's so many people who are like, oh, it's a fad diet. Keto's been around for like over 100 years. It started as a therapeutic diet for kids who suffer from seizures. And there is a lot of anecdotal evidence now that shows that people who have neurological issues, which I do, benefit from having a low carb diet. I've been low carb for probably on and off for 12 years, 15 years. I did Atkins for a while. I did paleo for a while. I've done the Whole30 for a while. And one thing that I know to be true about me and my body is that I am basically allergic to carbs. When I have carbohydrates, it causes my blood glucose to elevate. It doesn't matter if they're low or high on the glycemic index. A sweet potato and a regular potato, my body reacts the exact same way. I did a video not too long ago that talked about, diet soda and how, there are a couple of diet sodas that taste sweet, that are low carb and sugar free, that still affect my blood glucose levels. So I am very much one of those people who benefit the most from having low carb or zero carbs. So that's the way of eating that I'm focusing on. And notice that I'm saying way of eating and not diet. The thing with keto, and this isn't really a part of this video, but something I want to remind people of, is that you cannot consider keto a short-term diet. Because all you're going to do is you're going to gain your weight all the way back, because you're going to train your body to burn your fat for fuel, and then you're going to go back and have it burning carbohydrates for fuel. And if you've ever paid attention, like if you're someone who's done keto and then you went back on carbohydrates, there are a couple of things that happen. Number one, you're hungrier more often. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. I think that's why a lot of people are so hungry after we have Chinese food. Like if you're having the rice, because a lot of Chinese sauces have sugar in them. And then you're either having noodles with it or you're having rice with it. And then 3 hours later, you're hungry again. And it could be the MSG, but I think it's because of the high carbohydrate rate and a lot of foods that, from the Chinese restaurant. And then for someone like me who already deals with a lot of arthritic, I have rheumatoid arthritis, I have regular arthritis, I deal with a lot of inflammation in my body. Carbohydrates exacerbate that. Is that the word? Exacerbate? It just makes it worse. It makes it so much worse. And it'll take, 7 to 10 days before my body can get back to the point where it's not dealing with so much inflammation from carbohydrates. So for me, in order to tend to my body, I'm going to stick with a very low carb and keto. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to implement a routine for physical therapy and pain relief pain management. So one thing that I haven't been doing that I really should be doing are my physical therapy exercises. My physical therapist, Damon, he was with me when I got home in June, all the way up until like the middle of November. The middle of November. And one thing that he had me doing were exercises where I could lay down, and I was really working on my core and my pelvic areas to build up strength in those areas. And I feel like I need to do that again. I need to continue those. I got a lot of comments about why don't I lift weights, or why don't I do yoga, or why don't I do chair exercises. Unfortunately, the myasthenia gravis that I have causes extreme muscle weakness, and I literally just cannot do weights. In fact, a couple of times Damon wanted me to do an exercise holding a liter of water. I couldn't do it. I got like 2 done, and I was like, I have to put my arms down because it really wears me out. And there are days, and I've mentioned this in the past, that even just holding my fork or trying to cut my meat or feeding myself, it's damn near impossible. So unfortunately, that's just not something that's in the cards for me, but that's okay. Another thing I want to do is make sure that I'm icing or putting heat in the areas that I need to every day, and that, I'm either wearing my lidocaine patches or, I'm doing my e-stem, those kinds of things. So I'm going to establish some routines. I can do my exercises when I first wake up, and then, when I get in bed. So I really want to make sure that I'm tending to those things. You see a theme here? There's a theme here. So that's kind of it for my body. Like I said, just making sure that I'm feeding it what it needs to eat, and that I'm exercising the way that I can. Hopefully I will be able to get in the pool when it finally warms up. This is how all this started. I went to step into the pool, and then something happened, and I ended up having back surgery in October. So, really just focusing on what I can do. And that's, like I said, just what I can control. So that's really it about the body. As far as my mind and my emotional health, I'm continuing therapy. Today I went, it's the first time I've been in about 6 weeks. So, just making sure that I'm doing that. I talked about in my Project Pan no buy video that I want to do, like, kind of my self-care for 2020 is to get up 3 days a week and put makeup on and get dressed, even if I don't go anywhere. Because one thing that I feel like has happened is I am homebound. I mean, I can't really go anywhere unless Rob was with me, because I can't lift my walker. I can't do a whole bunch of things. Like, I can't walk very far. So I really need him with me in order for me to go out, unless it's like from my therapist, because I literally just have to walk to his front door and that's it. But I tend to get into this mindset, or I tend to get into this kind of, I don't know if it's I don't know, but I just know that I feel better when I put on makeup. And I don't put on makeup because I think I'm ugly and I want to look pretty, and makeup's the only way to do that. I put on makeup because I enjoy putting on makeup. I like playing with eyeshadows. I like playing with lashes. I like playing with my look. It's easier than buying clothes and stuff like that. So, but I really feel like that's some self-care. When I say self-care, that's what I mean by self-care is, it's not about me, taking a bath with a bath bomb. It's really about helping my subconscious or my conscious self feel better mentally and emotionally. And I think being able to get up and get ready, will just help me feel a semblance of normal. And I know everybody's like, there's no normal. And when I say normal, I mean the normal that I had before July of 2016. Because if you're new around here, I have been on a downward spiral since July of 2016. It was a skin cancer, then it was emergency gallbladder surgery, then it was my thyroid, then it was the myasthenia, then it was nerve damage, then it was the OPLL in my back, and then it was DKA, and it's just been one thing after another, and it's been really, really rough. And I've suffered a lot of depression. I've been suicidal a couple of times. So I just really want to focus on things that are going to help me feel like I felt in 2016. I was getting up, I was putting on makeup, I was going to work, coming home. I feel like a productive adult. And I think one way to do that is to start getting in a routine where I could get up and, put some clothes on, put my face on, and feel like I'm a contributing member of society. And again, this is just kind of how I feel. I'm not saying that you have to get up and put on makeup in order to feel like you matter. It's just, a way to help myself. So that's kind of self-care that I'm going to do. Going back to my body, I also want to make sure that I'm taking care of my skin. I'm diabetic, and my skin tends to be really, really dry. And one thing that we have to watch out for is our skin cracking and getting infected. So I want to make sure that I'm putting on lotions, putting on body oils, really paying attention to my body and making sure that I'm taking care of it on the outside as much as I'm taking care of it on the inside. Another thing I'm going to do for my self-care or for my mental and emotional state is to get back into using my planner. I am a planner person. I was making planner videos every week. I was keeping a monthly planner and a weekly planner. And I really kind of stopped that after I left work. But one thing that I want to do is start keeping track of what I'm doing every day, and know that sometimes it's the smallest victories, and sitting down and making sure that I'm scheduling. Maybe I schedule 2 hours that day to get stuff done, and then I can rest the rest of the time. I feel like I need a way to record that I'm being productive. I need a way to write down what I need to do, because the last 3 weeks I've done a whole lot of nothing. And some of that was because Rob was home for 2 weeks, and I mentioned on Facebook, he was home for 2 weeks and we just didn't do anything but sit beside each other, watch TV. We went out to dinner a couple of times, just being together, because as much as it's affected me, it's affected him as well. And I just wanted 2 weeks out of our lives where we weren't stressed and we weren't worrying about me having to go to 1,000 different doctor's appointments. It was just 2 weeks of us just being together. And I really did enjoy that. But I have a laundry list of things I need to get done. So if I sit down, fill out my planner, put it where it needs to go, then that will work. And the other thing I have is I'm going to do a health journal. I had initially started a traveler's notebook thinking I would do this, but I found a bullet journal planner, and I'm going to do a haul and talk about this on my Jolly Fat Elf channel later in the weekend, probably, or next week. But I want to keep track of, like my ketones and my weight and my measurements, and then stuff related to like my symptoms and those kinds of things. So when I go see one of the myriad of doctors that I have, I think I have 8, I counted the last time, I'll have a little journal that I can take with me and go, okay, this is what's happening. Can we talk about it, and those kinds of things. So that's really something that I want to do for my, my mental health and my emotional state. The other thing that I'm going to do for self-care, mental, emotional, is to cut myself some slack. If you guys have been with me for a while, you've probably noticed this, but I can be really, really hard on myself. I've always been the type of person who's been very driven. I've been very ambitious. I've always set really high expectations and goals for myself. And now that my life is completely different to what it was, I have to allow myself an opportunity to rest and take a break. And if I have to have a nap that day, I can't beat myself up for listening to my body and it telling me what it needs. There are going to be days where I can get a ton done, and there are going to be days where I'm going to be lucky if I can brush my teeth or feed myself that day. It just is what it is. I cannot control that whatsoever. All I can control is the way that I react to it. And it's not my fault. I have to get away from that. It's not my fault. It's not my fault that I've developed 2 autoimmune diseases and a spinal disease that is hereditary. I don't control any of that. Like I said earlier, the only thing I can control is what I put in my body and how I treat my body. And one of those things I need to start controlling is how I talk to myself. And I think Dr. Becky Bailey does conscious discipline, and she talks about how every one of us has a CD in our brain of how we talk to ourselves, self-talk. And a lot of that has started very, very young. I mean, especially, if you remember, if you've been big your whole life, your parents talking about, oh, you're so pretty in the face if you would just lose weight. Like, all of that stuff is kind of stems from our childhood. And only we can rewire our brain and, flip the way of thinking around. And I think I've shared this story before, and if I have, I apologize. But up until I was probably 20, 21, maybe 22 years old, I hated myself. Not myself, but like my body. Because I had been told my entire life, since I was in the 2nd grade and put on diet pills, that I wasn't good enough. Like, I was fat, and that's all I was. I was just fat. That was my only identity. And, oh, you have such a pretty face, you should lose weight, you'll be perfect. Struggling with that. And I met this guy. This is back when Yahoo Personals were a thing. And it was like, my profile said, if you don't like fat girls, kiss my ass and have a nice day. And he messaged me and he's like, I like fat girls, can I kiss your ass anyway? And we started talking and we met and we went out a few times and then we were intimate. And I can remember, like, he stood me in the middle of my living room and he took his time, like, taking off my clothes and really just enjoying my body, instead of just being one of those guys who's like, okay, T-A, let's go. He really took his time with myself, and I felt beautiful when I was with him. So he left, and it was probably after a 2nd time we'd been intimate. And I can remember standing in my bathroom mirror and looking in the mirror and go, why don't I see what he sees? Why don't I see, the beauty in me? And it really flipped a switch for me. And I've been very confident in who I am since then, because your weight doesn't define who you are. You can be healthy at any size. I mean, there are people who are 125, 130 pounds, 185 pounds, who have heart disease, who die of heart attacks, who have high cholesterol, all these issues. But, there's so much propaganda against fat people. And, if you're fat, you're going to turn diabetic. Bullshit. You have to have a genetic predisposition. I mean, I don't have high cholesterol. I don't have any heart problems. I don't have high blood pressure. I'm fat, yeah, and I have type 2 diabetes, but diabetes runs in my family. I'm also Native American. So it wasn't like, I was all of a sudden, I got fat and then I developed type 2 diabetes. That's not how it works. But if you listen to mainstream media, they're saying, oh, you're fat, so you're going to have all these comorbidities. But some of those comorbidities are the same ones for people who have a normal BMI. So it all comes down to your genetics. So the whole point of this is, even though everything around you is telling you that you're not worth it, or there's something wrong with you, you just have to flip your switch. You just have to flip it in your brain. And so I remember, I think I was a senior in college, and I was staying at with my aunt and uncles for the weekend, and I was just laying there, and I was like, God, I'm so lazy. And my aunt's like, you're not lazy. And I was like, huh? She's like, Misty, she's like, you take 16 to 18 hours every semester. And she's like, you're working between 40 and 50 hours a week. She's like, you're not lazy, you're tired. And it's like, I automatically talk down upon myself, and it took somebody else to go, no. I mean, that's two instances where it's like somebody else gave me a different perspective and like, you know what, you're right. So it's really about rewriting that script or that CD in our brain. And like I said, I set high expectations. I've always been driven and ambitious. And it's like, I have to cut myself some slack. I have to say, even with like weight loss and stuff, it's like, okay, you did everything that you were supposed to do, and the scale just didn't move. And that's okay. Keep doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my goal, and continuing therapy and continuing on being an antidepressant, and just talking to somebody and continuing to make these update videos, and just, sharing when I'm having issues. Another thing that has worked really well for me as far as like self-care with my mental and emotional state is when people come to me with their problems, I've learned to say, I can't, right, I'm not emotionally in the place where I can help you with your drama or your issues right now. And I don't say it bitchy like that, but that's really what it comes down to, because when I'm anxious and when I'm dealing with so much stress on my own, I literally don't have time to take on, I don't have the time or the brain power or the emotional state to take on someone else's problems. So, it just comes down to a point of saying, no, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you today. I'll reach out to you when I feel like I'm in a better spot, and then we will talk about what's going on with you. So that was a whole lot of talking, but that's kind of what I plan to do. The other area I really want to focus on are my relationships. I think a lot of us who go through such a lifestyle change tend to become turtles. Sometimes I call it digging a hole, when I'm really depressed, but it's also like being a turtle, like drawing into your shell, and not really listening to people, outside influences. A lot of people, when you're ill, chronically ill, you lose a lot of friendships because sometimes people just don't know how to treat you when you're sick. You see it a lot of times when somebody has cancer or something like that, because it makes the other people uncomfortable and they're not sure how to, act around you and stuff. And for me, it's really hard because I can't go and do anymore. Like, there's no spontaneity to me unless we're just going for a drive. If you want to take me to the movies, or if we were going to go out to dinner, or, you want to go somewhere and do something, I need a couple of days notice so I can not take a couple of pills that cause me issues. I have to not do anything for a couple of days so I can kind of save up my muscles and my strength. I have to know the handicap parking situation, and if I need to have my wheelchair, if I can walk with my rollator. So there are so many things that go into just going out to eat with somebody. And a lot of times people just don't want to deal with that. And unfortunately, that's on them. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, again, I can only control what I can control. But a lot of times relationships tend to be put on the back burner. And a friend of mine came to see me yesterday, and she and I used to see each other every day because she worked for me. And we've seen each other probably 3 times since 2017. And she's one of my best friends, my very best friends. And I told her yesterday, I was like, we cannot go a year. It's not like she lives out of state. She lives like two towns over or whatever. I was like, we have to not go a year before we see each other again. I was like, I'm really going to try in 2020 to be the type of person who reaches out more often, or who, tries to make sure that I'm staying in contact with friends and family and those kinds of things. So that's kind of, how I'm going to tend to that. And then finally, I'm going to tend to my marriage and my husband. Everything that I've experienced since 2016, Rob has experienced it too. And he's had to deal with everything. I will never forget the day he came home and I was sobbing because they called and told me I may have ALS, or muscular dystrophy. And I had basically had a mental breakdown, and he came home to that, and he was very, he took care of me. He cried, dried my tears. Like, he's been such a rock for me the last few years. But it feels like he's really slipped into a caregiver role rather than us being more on equal footing. And unfortunately, so much has happened. I mean, he's literally had to take care of me. And you make your vows for better, for worse, for sickness and health. And I understand that. But I really hope 2020 is the year where he and I can kind of reconnect. And he doesn't have to be in such a caretaker role. He doesn't have to be the person that, showers me and gets me dressed and feeds me when I can't feed myself. I really want us. That's why I was content with just to spend those 2 weeks with him and not worry about anything. Because, like I said, we haven't had that in forever. We haven't had an opportunity to just sit down and be together without any stress. My back is being, other than me being in pain, there's really not anything that's really stood in our way from that. And we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary on New Year's Eve. And out of those 10 years, only 3 of those have been like where we were both working. We had, we were both pretty decently healthy. Like, there were 3 years there where I didn't go to the hospital. I wasn't seeing the doctor every day. But 3 out of 10, so 7 years of our life, we've been under a tremendous amount of stress. Either he didn't have a job or I didn't have a job, or, I've been really sick the last couple of years and, we lost an income. I mean, it's just been a lot. And I just want to make sure that I'm giving him everything that he needs. I want to make sure that we're not just living as roommates. I'm not just, he's just not my caretaker. I want us to tend to our love and tend to our relationship and make sure that we're going on dates and make sure that we're reconnecting and making sure that, it's just not him always doing something for me. And, it's just, I've always said, and even since I started therapy, when this myasthenia gravis stuff started, I said, I just don't want it to affect my marriage. I just don't want to lose my husband. I say that all the time because I know how exhausting it is for me to live it, and it has to be just as exhausting for him, to have to live through it with me. And it's hard on him when, I'm in the hospital, and that's when we fight the most, is when I'm in the hospital, because it's so stressful for him. And he wants to help and he can't help, and and he feels out of control, and we tend to argue and fight. I don't know why that is, but it just is. And I'm not saying that we never argue and we never fight. We've been married 10 years. I think sometimes people think, oh, we're fighting, this is the end as we know it. But that's healthy, because you're 2 separate people. You're not going to agree on everything. You're not just going to. And when Rob and I very first got together, I'm a very dominant personality. I'm an extroverted introvert. More now so than I was before I got sick. But one thing I told him when we very first started dating, I was like, you cannot be a doormat to me. I was like, tell me no, let me know if I overstep my bounds. If I say something, I was like, I just want communication, because I didn't have that growing up. My mother was the queen of passive aggressiveness. She would get mad at me and she wouldn't tell me and she wouldn't talk to me for weeks. I'm talking about even when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. And we lived in a little 1,300 square foot house. And I would literally be in front of her trying to get her attention, and she would just completely ignore me. And I would never know what I did. Never knew what I did. So I told, now I'm like, we are going to communicate. And I do my best, like if I'm angry with him or if I feel like we need to have a conversation, I do my best to go take a nap, and then I wake up and then we have our conversation, because I never want to come into it angry. So, but yeah, I want to, like I said, I feel like this is the garden of Misty, and I'm tending to that garden. And the last one is kind of spiritual. I am spiritual, but I'm not religious. I don't believe in organized religion. I just find that I just don't believe in organized religion. That doesn't mean that I'm not Christian. That doesn't mean that I don't believe in heaven and hell. That just means I don't believe in organized religion. I also don't believe in some of the stuff in the Bible. So put it that way. I don't believe that my God created somebody just to consider them an abomination. And I know that there have been so many versions of that Bible, and it's been edited and stuff has been taken out and stuff has been put in. So for me, I'm more spiritual than I am religious. And one thing that I want to make sure that I'm doing this year is making sure that I'm taking time to meditate and to pray and to, just feel like I'm having a conversation to kind of help again with my mental and my emotional state. So it's a pretty big kind of to-do list, if you want to say, with this word this year. But I just feel like I want 2020 to be a year where I'm not in the hospital. There's no hospital visits. There's no hospital stays. Like, there's no major surgeries. I just need 2020 to be just kind of a chill year, so I can we can kind of rebuild and regenerate and recharge, and just, not only personally, but with relationships as well. So in my relationship with you guys, I want to tend to this channel and tend to, my Patreon. Like, I have a Patreon, and I'm really good sometimes about sticking with it, and then something happens and it takes me forever to get back to it, and that's not fair to the people that are donating to me every month. So, I want to get consistent with my my Patreon, and just so many kinds of things. I have a whole lot of plants in this garden of Misty. And I need to make sure that I'm paying attention and caring for everything. The whole enchilada. Okay? All right. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. Let me know down below if you have a word of the year, or if you've ever even heard of that concept, or if you've set New Year's resolutions, or if you've set goals. Not everybody can choose a word of the year. For some people, it's way too vague. For some people, it's way too restricting. That's okay. Whatever you do to set some goals, because I think everybody needs some goals in their life. But yeah, that's it. That's a whole lot of talking. I think I've been talking for 2 hours and 97 minutes. I'm just kidding. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, guys. I hope you have a fantastic day, night, evening, wherever you are, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.